Who am I talking to? Who do I talk to every week? I can't remember his name.
Yeah. I'm gonna leave that in to punish myself.
Hello, and welcome to the Transport Leaders podcast, where two blokes talk about transport stuff.
I'm Graham McCabe. I'm a traffic engineer and transport planner, and I've worked across the Asia Pacific.
And hello, I'm Russell King. I'm a transport strategist with about 20 years experience in transport policy making, and I write the Transport Leaders blog and newsletter.
Okay, Russell, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, Graham, often in this podcast, we talk about subjects and take a sort of slightly different view on things that sound good and sort of highlight the problems that we have with them. But I think today's might be different. We're going to talk about two things that come together that must be a good thing. One is value, obviously a good thing. And second is engineering. So when you combine the two, value engineering, this must be a podcast about how great value engineering is, right?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Well, let's see how we go then.
Yeah. I mean, being able to drive down the cost of projects through improving their engineering, is that what you're talking about?
I have no idea. So let's start with the basics. What is value engineering, Graham?
Okay, I'll try and keep it simple, and then people can hate me in the comments. So value engineering is, at its core, identifying where costs of program can be saved. So the program, the amount of time it takes them to be delivered, through engineering out the excesses. So when a project is first scoped, we'll have a cost and time estimate associated with it, and you will have a document called it business requirements specification that says, here's all the things we want this project to deliver, and here's the cost estimate, and here's the time frame. And then when you get into the detail, generally these things often extend in both dollars and time. And in order to bring the program back into schedule, you start identifying things that can be engineered out of the project in order to save time or money.
Okay, so let's just dig into a little bit more detail. When does this value engineering process happen?
It can happen all the way through the project. So you may have a tunnel, for example, that's being dug and it hits hard rock. So they have to spend more time and money on that tunnel. And they'll be like, okay, well, where can we save money elsewhere on the project? Let's identify some things that can be descoped, so taken out of the scope of the project, and those cost savings and those time savings, and we will value engineer them out of the project because they're not really that important. You may have you are going to upgrade a park as part of the project. Well, that's not really related to the tunnel that we're building, is it? So maybe we can just, save some money and time there, because that was a thing that was going to be done right at the end of the project, and it's a bit of fluff to keep the community happy.
Okay, so talk me through something. Back in the distant past, before I got into the world of transport, I did some IT project management.
Okay.
And one of the things that you would do in the IT project management world is when you're sort of defining your requirements, you would look at sort of the priorities of those requirements. Are they must-haves, should-haves, nice-to-haves? Okay. How does a value engineering differ from sort of that approach?
Okay. So if you're doing value engineering well, there's a V diagram that you follow, which is, at the start of the project, you identify your outcomes. And then as you go through the process of scoping it up, doing detail, and then actually implementing, you should be going across back to the other side of the V to refer to the things that the project was designed to support. So a good example of value engineering would be bus priority. So you can do bus priority by painting lanes on a road. So just saying an existing lane is now a bus lane. You can widen the road to put a bus lane in. You can widen a road to put another car lane in, like a left turn or lane in the Australian UK context, or right turn in other parts of the world. that is get some of the cars out of the way and then the bus can also use it. So when you do your business requirements, you could say, well, our objective is to speed up the buses by X. And then you go, okay, well, let's look at the ways we can do that. And if one of those is by widening, and then you go, oh, well, we want to save some money, so we won't make it a continuous bus lane. We'll make it a turn lane, and then just do a little bit on the other side of the traffic, because all the property acquisition was going to be too much. So then when you refer back to the other side of your inverted V or your V shape, you go, is it delivering bus priority? Yeah-ish, but is it cheaper?
Yes. So there's some interesting things there, because value doesn't just mean price, right? There's more than just one aspect of value, because it's kind of like, it's two parts of it. There's bang and the buck, right? So anybody can save money. The trick is either maintaining or not damaging too much the bang that you get, the outcomes that you're trying to get. Is that a fair?
Yeah.
Case?
So often when you have a roads project, and we've been talking about, the problems with road projects a lot, what the first things that get valued out of that project, public transport and active transport measures. So you may start off with the fancy architectural, combined pedestrian and cycling bridge as part of the project. It's like, whoa, that bridge is going to cost a lot of money. Is it providing a connection across the road? No. We're not going to put a value on the beauty aspect, the enjoyability, the ease and comfort. We'll just put a value on the crossing of the road. And it's like, okay, well, we can do that with a set of stairs and a lift.
So this is kind of like teasing into the problems. But before we get into the problems of value engineering and the mistakes that get made, what do you need to do to get value engineering right? What are the key things when so you're not saying that value engineering is a bad thing, but I think what we're saying is it's done badly. So let's work on the assumption that you're doing value engineering right. What are the things that you are getting right to get value engineering to work?
Yeah. So the project owner is the important bit. So the value engineering is often done in the bad way by the deliverer of the project, and often they win the discussion. So even if you have the project owner or the initiator on a steering committee, well, it's like, oh, well, the program's going to get blown out. The costs are blowing out. We have to save money. And the people who are looking for those things are the ones who win.
So just
most often. So it's having the project initiator being the project owner and holding firm to what the purpose and outcome of the.
So there's a governance alignment here that's important between the people who are almost, it's the people, but also presumably, and we'll get to the next bit in a minute. But yeah, so getting the people aligned and making sure that the project team that's delivering this is aligned with what the outcomes that the project sponsors, for want of a better word, or the people that are requesting the project and the outcomes that they're seeking are all aligned. So that's a key thing.
Yeah, and when you have project managers who are project managers, rather than going back to the example, having dedicated bus priority teams, then those people focus on delivery of the project because that's their KPIs. The KPI is delivery and completion of a project, not delivering completion of a project that was the objective necessarily in the initial scoping. So you need to have that really strong governance where the weight of authority is actually either structured towards the people who are seeking the project benefits, or you need to have a combined team which just focuses on that activity. And we've talked about, one of the problems with the Anglosphere is we don't have continuity of people between projects where, each metro is unique, each light rail system is unique. So you get people who are good at delivering metros and light rails, but they have no responsibility for the outcomes that the delivery process creates.
Yeah, we'll get there I'm sure. But is this a challenge with project management generally? So project management has to deliver kind of three core things, right? One is on time, ideally. The second thing is on budget. And the third thing is, delivering the outcomes that are defined. And I think it's fair to say that the first two, so on time and on budget, are what project managers typically get assessed against. And the outcome is much less important in terms of how project managers are perceived. Is that fair? Is this part of the problem?
Well, so there's nobody really measuring the outcome.
Yeah. They get measured on the...
So
yes, that's right. There's a whole bunch of conflicts of interest in why we don't want to measure outcomes in transport, right? So, let's keep all the positive things on the engineering side.
Yeah, but it goes all the way back to the concept development, or actually the strategy. So if the strategy says, here's our objective, the people who write the strategy, they don't own the KPIs that come out of it. So if the engineering, design and delivery people and the operations people aren't signed up to the KPIs from the people who write the strategy, then, without that level, and this is actually a good thing because I've seen it work really well. When you have the level of shared responsibility where everybody is focused on the same set of outcomes, then you actually get really good programs and projects.
So one of the key things to get value engineering right is that sort of alignment, okay, between the sort of delivery teams and the governance. What else? What else do you need to do to get value engineering to work?
Well, political alignment. Because
what do you mean by political alignment?
So delivering, not creating projects and delivering projects which are all singing, all dancing for all people.
Example. Make it tangible for me.
Yeah, okay. All right. Motorways. So when Sydney built the motorways tunnels in the last 10 years, a lot of investment went into creating really fabulous parks around those tunnels. Okay, they're next to motorways and exhaust stacks and blah, blah, blah. Not great in terms of health outcomes, but they're really nice parklands. So you go, well, is that part of a motorway scope, or is that part of an urban renewal scope that just happens to be associated with the delivery of a motorway? Detailed project delivery people will go, well, that's not part of a motorway. The political class will go, we need that because that keeps those local residents happy.
Yes.
The urban planning people go, well, that actually enables us to do housing and all these other things around it. So you have to make sure that there's good alignment between all of those factors.
Yeah, I think we've recently seen an example where that went wrong, where the project team had descoped. I think it was to do some cycling infrastructure on a project, on a road project. And they had got descoped, but they hadn't told the minister. And suddenly the local residents who were promised that cycling infrastructure were up in arms, and the minister was denying that there was a problem. And suddenly it turns out that actually they had descoped it. They just hadn't quite informed the minister. So, that goes back to that point about project and political alignment are important.
Yeah. And I don't know if the project's the one that you're talking about that's actually in my local area, but there was
not in Wollongong. Was there another one like that in Wollongong?
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of one in Wollongong, but okay. But there's another one, right? So this is a good example. Yeah. It's happening a lot. Okay.
Yeah. So the one in Wollongong is actually a really interesting one because they included active transport bridge within the project. But Port Kembla is used for wind turbine blade imports, and there's only one route that they can use, which happened to be on this road. At some point, somebody went, well, rather than increasing the height of the bridge and all the costs that are associated with having a wheelchair accessible bridge that is higher, we'll just put an at-grade crossing. So they descoped the bridge and community go up in arms. Yeah, and this is a joint federal state project. I don't know what level this decision was made up, but the bridge is now back in the scope, and it's a higher bridge with longer approaches. But somebody went, this bridge is going to be too expensive or too hard to build. We will all value engineer it out of the project because we can put an at-grade crossing. But you can't. The at-grade crossing couldn't be signalised because it's part of a safety system for trucks that are coming down a 4-kilometre long 12% grade. So you couldn't have a set of traffic signals there. So So that's where political alignment comes in, is that the project team has to have an understanding of why things are within that original scope in the first place. So that crossing the V and actually talking to people who understand why the thing is in the project anyway, rather than just making the decision, well, it's no longer required.
So, okay, so that's a couple of things we've got now: value engineering,
Yeah.
political alignment, governance. What else do we need to make sure we get right on value to make value engineering work?
Well, again, it's having the right scope in the first place. So we've talked, a lot about the challenges with the underground metros that are being built in Sydney and the station spacing.
Yeah.
So if your objective of the metro is to increase housing supply as well as improving connectivity, then you have lots of stations. If the purpose of your metro is to get between two places fast, then you have as few stations as possible to really show our age. Going back to Yes Minister, was it Yes Prime Minister? The best hospital, most efficient hospital is the one that has no patients.
Yes, it won the award.
Yeah.
So the question, I mean, there's an interesting thing here, right? Is, for me, this comes back to top level, which is, are you looking for your outcomes or outputs? Okay.
Yes.
Because for me, the travel time is not an outcome. Travel time is the time savings that you get from this route is an output. It's not the be all and end all. You're trying to do the travel time saving for some other reason, right? So it might be because you are trying to achieve mode shift away from another mode, and you want to make sure that the travel time is compelling, for example. Or you might want to be doing it for an economic reason. So one of the arguments between the time connecting between Newcastle and Sydney, for example, on high-speed rail, is around the development that it should be able to deliver as a consequence.
Yeah. Maybe we should find another example rather than high speed.
Well, okay, that's high-speed rail in Australia, but it's true in high-speed rail in France, right? When you're connecting two major cities in France with a high-speed rail, one of the big positives for that journey time is not the journey time itself, it's the economic benefits that it brings, because people can now live in one city and work in the other. They can commute across the piece. They provide more job opportunities for people. And the businesses in one city now have a much wider catchment for the workforce, which brings productivity benefits as we allocate people to jobs they're better available for. So that's kind of like, that for me is the outcome here. And the problem, I think, in transport is far too often, once you get past the business case where there's an attempt to deliver on outcomes, because that's how you measure your benefits, right? Is more housing, more economic growth, etc. Although we do far too much on travel time savings, which we talked about, see our other episode on business cases, right? But once you get past that business case, the project manager's not interested in those things as a priority.
Well, yeah. So this is where I think, so historically you would have people who followed projects through their life. And then that was broken out into project development and project delivery. But the project delivery teams within government were focused on delivering a type of project. So they had that connectivity to the development. So using the bus priority, for example. So I was responsible for planning, so identification of projects, and doing strategic evaluation of their benefits. That was handed across to project development managers who were in the same team. And they would check back in that as the project was progressing, it was still achieving the outcomes. Because we're part of the same team, we had the same overall responsibility. So our top line objectives were the same.
You were integrated.
But the delivery team, so the people who actually manage the construction contracts, they were outside the team, but they were integrated the team. So while they sat within project delivery team, like there was, weekly meetings about project delivery, and they were like, if there was an issue where there may have to be some value or some scope change, and property acquisition was always the biggest. So property acquisition utilities were the things that were always killed in bus priority. So they will go. So there would always be a pipeline of projects ready to advance to the next step if there was a major hurdle financially or politically with a project. So there was a constant pipeline of projects. So you had the same people responsible for delivery of the project. So they would finish, they'd be finished one project while another one was in the detailed design phase. So they'd have 3 or 4 projects, constantly on the go. And the externalization of that activity has meant that it's, the continuation of your project delivery contract is based on project delivery. How can a civil design company or construction company be held responsible for whether a 30-second achievement in travel time savings for buses at an intersection has been achieved? That's got nothing to do with the fact that it opened on day one.
And was it in budget?
And was it in budget? Yeah, because next time that tender comes up, that's the things that they will be measured against.
Yes, and the reason for they're being measured against is that because that's who the departments,
that's what they do.
People are getting measured against, right? Because it's and that's a problem at the heart of our project management is we're overweighting on budget and on time at the expense of outcomes. So I'm not sure how we fix that. That's probably a discussion for another time. But okay, so we keep going on the things that you need to do to keep value engineering work, to make value engineering work.
Yeah. So and when you're going from the concept into the development into the detail, you still need to be going back through the V and going, okay, well, is this thing I'm about to deliver still actually giving the outcomes that were identified in the initial scoping phase? But if that's not your expertise, and then if you don't have a person to go back to, and the way that things are structured is the people who are delivering projects, they don't respond to us. They don't meet with a steering committee who's responsible for ensuring the outcomes. They meet with a project manager who then may prepare a memo that goes through his manager to a steering committee.
Yes, and I think
there's lots of things that are lost in translation in that process.
Yes.
And we've lost, I think, the scope for innovation. So the traffic engineer working with the design company, if they can't, their role isn't to come up with a better outcome to the BRS. Their role is to come up with a better traffic solution that supports the profit of the delivery company.
Yeah, but wonder whether almost government is the problem here in a sense of doing these projects. Let me give you an example. Okay. Let's take the first ever metro line that was ever built anywhere. So the Metropolitan line in London. It was not built by a railway company. It was built by a bunch of developers, a developer effectively. They had a whole bunch of land in northwest London on what we now call the suburbs of northwest London. Okay. But at the time was greenfield. And in order to be able to make the value work for that delivery, that project in terms of building housing, they needed to be able to get the people into where the jobs were in the City of London.
Yes.
And so they built the metro line in order to support the housing and provide the accessibility into jobs.
Yes.
Now, the key thing there,
and the suburban trains were the steam engines were banned. Railways were banned from entering central London. That's what.
Yeah, going through central London.
At that time.
They had to go to the outskirts that's because of all the landowners were basically all in the House of Lords and would have blocked the property legislation.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why all the terminals are just on the edge of the centre of.
Yes, and very little goes through London.
Yes, yeah, and they're all next to each other.
Now, but the thing is that they weren't focused on the transport aspects of this. They were focused on the outcome from their perspective, which was around enabling the commercial development of the housing, right? And that seems to have delivered a very good outcome piece. But when I compare that to the troubles we've got with metro lines not integrating with land use, it does feel like there was a better model then. Now, bringing that forward into the 21st century, where do we see models of governance where transport is integrated really effectively with the land use? It's places like Hong Kong with MTR or Singapore, where there's much more focus on getting the most out of where a station goes in terms of the land use as well. And because that's a core part of their commercial model. It's true in Japan as well. You see this a lot with the high-speed rail companies. They're building a lot of they own a lot of the land around the stations and develop it, or at least
No, well, yeah.
get somebody else to develop it and own the proceeds.
Yeah. So Singapore's probably a little different because you have the combination of the Land Transport Authority and the Urban Redevelopment Authority. So the URA does the master planning of where they want growth to occur, and then LTA will do the metro development. Like, they build stations like 10, 15 years ahead of development. There are shuttered stations in Singapore that are, you walk past them and they're, basically a concrete box, but there's a station underneath it. So, I think, using Singapore as an example, possibly isn't that great because of the long-termism that the Singaporean government has, which I don't really think exists in the Anglosphere at the moment. Although some of the suburban rail loop in Victoria and the Western Sydney Airport Metro, I suppose, are long-termism because they're going to take 20 to 100 years to have anyone using them.
Yes. Okay. We're getting off the subject of value engineering.
Yeah,
We've gone down a little bit of a rabbit
yes,
hole.
yeah.
So let's come back out of the rabbit. But it's an important point. But which is around. Again, it's kind of like, what is it you're trying to achieve? My focus here is on the challenge with value engineering. I think is the delivery organization is the transport organization.
Mm.
And increasingly, the outcomes that we're looking for from our transport system are not directly transport outcomes. Transport enables those outcomes, but they are not transport key performance indicators like the traditional transport indicators like travel time savings, right? What we're trying to do is deliver, and in the case of active transport, right, health outcome. Right,
yes.
is a core part. So if you have a look at the active transport business cases, the reason they have often very high benefit cost ratios is overwhelmingly the health benefits. It's not the transport benefits that are giving those things huge amounts of very, very high benefit cost ratios. It's the health benefits that are turbocharging them.
Yeah, it's what is it? It's about $5 Australian for every additional kilometre walked, and $4 for every additional kilometre cycled, and about half that for e-biking, just in terms of health benefits. Yeah. So, and then with active transport, the biggest benefits that come are from increasing density, because then you have more people, which requires more services, more jobs, more opportunities, all closer to each other. So you actually have a compounding effect. And I mean, the whole piece of value engineering is quite interesting because in that regard, because if you're thinking of urban outcome, okay, well, what's cheaper, to build an elevated railway or ground level, elevated or underground railway? If you already own the property, then at ground level is easiest with the exception of crossings. Then if you don't own the property, well, you might consider elevated rights of way. And then if your property is really expensive, then you go underground. So the value engineering piece is in what level is your railway at, whereas the strategic business outcome back up at the top left-hand side of your V could be urban development. So if you're doing urban development, well, you definitely don't want an at ground level railway because that's precincts apart, same motorways. And then you're like, well, can we have a pretty sky rail?
Yes. And we see these sorts of things like light rail projects are a really good example, right? One of the big advantages of light rail over, say, just a dedicated bus lane is the urban amenity opportunities that you get and the economic development that comes off the back.
Yes. Yeah. When I was working on trackless trams, one of the questions I got asked when I was doing a presentation on it was like, well, couldn't we just put trackless trams in George Street in Sydney and not worry about all the cost and time and expense of doing tracked trams, normal light rail. And it's like, you wouldn't have got the urban outcome, because if you just replaced buses with trackless trams or bi-articulated buses or metro buses or however you want to term them, then there's a good chance George Street wouldn't have been closed. There's a really high chance that there would have been no urban renewal as part of the project, because those things would have been value engineered out of the project, because they would have been, oh, we're just reducing the number of buses. So it would have kept cars. If the objective was to have a more efficient bus network, then the buses already had a bus lane, so you just replace the buses with bigger buses.
Yeah. Yes. And this comes back to the heart of the thing, like the heart of the challenge here, which is defining your outcomes and making sure that they're not outputs. So we talked earlier about bus priority, right? So the purpose of bus priority for me is not about speeding up buses. Speeding up buses is not the objective here on bus priority. It's an output that you're hoping will then deliver the outcome of more people on the bus, mode shift towards the bus, in effect. And, so if all other things being equal, if I get a faster bus trip, but no more people use the bus, that's a failure.
Yeah. So even in the outcome framework, you still put an output, which is more people using the bus. So, and I think we've talked about outcomes versus outputs when we did land use, integrating land use and transport.
We've touched on it a few times, yeah.
Yeah. So the outcome is people feel that using the bus enables them to make their daily transport, and they feel safe and comfortable using it, and that it's reliable.
Is that the outcome, or is that still an output? Because what you're trying to the consequences of all those things, don't get me wrong, those things are important, right? But what you're trying to achieve is the consequences of those things, which is more people using the bus.
Which is an output.
Yes, it is.
Measuring the number of people on the bus is an output. Measuring the reliability of the bus is an output. So those are things that are in control. Measuring the reliability of the bus is something that's in control of the people who operate the buses and the people who manage the roads. Whether you and I want to use the bus is not something that's in their control. So having a system where people feel safe and comfortable and use the bus is a combo of an outcome versus an output. So the outcome is, I see bus as a viable mode of transport and I'm willing to use it. And I do use it. The output's the number of people, the mode share. So, it's like free public transport fares. Free public transport fares increase patronage, but amongst people who are already using public transport.
Or walking and cycling already.
So the outcome hasn't actually changed. You haven't got people who previously hate buses using buses.
Just on this subject, slight side one, I'm going to go down it. Feel free to edit out, right? But I think we're going to go through a really interesting natural experiment in Australia now with regards to fares policy and fuel tax. Because of the rising fuel prices, we've seen lots of, we're seeing 2 states have now gone to free fares for public transport, Victoria and Tasmania. And New South Wales, South Australia and Western Australia have resisted that temptation to date. And I think it will be interesting to see what the difference is in terms of getting people out of their cars and reducing car use from just simply higher fuel prices versus higher fuel prices and free fares. And I think that will be a really interesting bit that I'm sure the researchers and the academics will be looking at carefully in the years ahead.
Yeah. Tasmania has done free fares before as part of COVID recovery when they were having trouble so unfortunately part of the reason was that they're having trouble with bus cancellations and reliability because they had a driver shortage. So in Hobart and potentially, I can't remember if it was all of Tasmania, they had free bus fares for a while. It didn't actually increase patronage. You could say, well, that was because of the other issues of the reliability, people's personal safety and security, cancellations, all those types of things. But the natural experiment that's going on, I mean, you would have to look at the difference in service levels versus people in New South Wales, South Australia and WA who've shifted to public transport and whether there's a what the difference between the mode shifts versus fuel price.
Yeah, and there's it's a viable alternative or not. You can have some interesting things. It's an interesting rabbit hole, but let's get back onto value engineering. All right.
Yes.
So
yeah. Okay.
So we've got one of the things I think is an interesting nuance at the moment is we're seeing a number of road projects that are coming up, and you touched on this earlier, where they have active transport elements in them. And what's interesting is it's the active transport aspects of those projects that is getting the BCRs above 1. It's not the road project. It's not the widening of the road that's getting the BCR above 1. It's the combination of the road project with the active transport project. And if you take the active transport aspect away, it doesn't get the BCR above 1, i.e. the project isn't justified from a value perspective. But what's interesting is, of course, they then start the project, they then value engineer it because they're running behind schedule or running over budget. And what do they descope? They descope the active transport, which is the bit that has the highest benefit cost ratio on it.
Yes. Yeah.
What are they doing wrong? What's going wrong there on the value engineering?
Well, again, it's not checking back in with so even with these big projects, the active transport component is a thing that's required by policy or politics or direction. It's not a thing that's inherently seen as part of the project at some levels. So even if you go back across the V, it's like, oh yeah, we were told to put that we had to have a shared path along this rural freeway. So it becomes easy for the person who's written the requirement, who is being mandated to have this thing, to go, well, yeah, we can justify it. Because they don't have that belief set of why this thing's in the project in the first place.
Yeah. See, I understand where you're coming from. I appreciate that there's the governance piece here, right? But I do wonder whether you would ever get a scenario where you're building a road project where the active transport project is the one that's delivering the benefits, in effect, right? And when it gets value engineered, okay, whether in our current governance models, right, the project manager can't descope the road project, right? They can descope the active transport project. There isn't an alternative. And one of the things I think here is kind of budget ownership, right? So what we've seen in places which are, doing really well on active transport, they have a dedicated amount of their budget put towards active transport, right? So I think it's Ireland, it's 20%, and there's a lot of campaigns around the world to get like 10% of your budget allocated to active transport. Now, the thing I would say is you do not want to give, in a joint project like a road and active transport project, you don't want to give that budget to the project director, right? Without a kind of contractor saying, you're going to have to deliver this. And if you don't deliver this, right, you have to refund us the money, right? Because then he doesn't have a scenario where the project director, I say he, could be a she, of course, the project director can deliver, can descope it without losing the budget. Because then suddenly their budget's over. They can't square the budget away by just simply descoping it, right? They might help them in timescales, but it's not going to help them in terms of their budget because they're going to lose the funding for the active transport because they're no longer delivering that requirement and where the funding comes from. So I wonder whether part of this is around who's owning that budget.
Yeah, and that has been done. I'm not close enough to know whether that's still being done, but I have seen large projects where the active transport component is actually owned by the active transport team.
Yeah.
So if you descope the active transport component, then your $1 billion project could lose $30-50 million, out of it, and maybe a drop in the bucket, but it might actually be something that's critical to the delivery. Of the
and
project.
keeps going. So if you take the Metro Northwest projects, right, in Sydney and City and Metro and Northwest, they originally had in scope significant access works to access the station with walking, cycling, and bus priority. Right, they were scoped originally. Somewhere along the line, they got descoped, right? And effectively, if you think about the way the trade-off was, we'll have commuter car parks instead of that access. And the thing I know is the commuter car parks were in kind of the priority for the project team, not necessarily a priority for the outcome you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I did actually work on that project. as part of their internal reference group. And one of the things that we were very keen on, for those of you who don't know, part of the metro is actually on a SkyRail and is about 150 metres from an 8-lane road where it's a challenge to cross the road at grade. Yeah, and one of the really important things was making sure that there was bridges from the two sides. And there are some to get people to and from the metro, but yeah, what do they do? 3 parking spaces?
I don't know what the number is.
Yeah. But if you're thinking, these days, somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 a space for a parking space that's at grade or in a small structure. It's a lot of money that was spent on commuter car parking. But at the same time, the land rezoning in the existing developed areas that were close to the station wasn't changed. So we didn't actually, make it easier for people to live close by and walk to the station. So, there's value engineering at all levels when you don't have integrated projects which are actually looking at the area, not just the infrastructure.
So, okay. Is there anything else you want to add then on value engineering that we haven't already covered?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. So let's say you're an engineer in a project team, okay, and you've been asked to value engineer. What advice would you provide? What's the top bits of advice you'd give to them?
So I would say talk to the project originators. Find out why things are in the requirements. So if it's said put an active transport link as part of your motorway or metro or whatever, find out why. So, is it because of a policy or is it because it actually helps people get to use your project? So you can't, otherwise you're just looking at time and dollars and you go, oh, well, what are things that are not critical? So if you're building a tunnel, you need a ventilation system. So when you're doing your ventilation system, maybe you find cheaper options from somewhere else in the world. But you can't not have a ventilation system. Whereas you can go, oh, well, there's a footpath there, therefore people can walk to the station. So we can knock out the 3.5 or 5 metre wide shared or separated path. So, but if in that process you're making it so that your project is so unattractive that people don't actually want to walk to that station, then you're not going to be held responsible down the track for people not actually using that station entrance.
And you do see a lot of this, like just in terms of where the station entrance is located. So it can make a massive difference to patronage, depending on can people actually easily access the station entrance. You see this, and the research makes a big difference. It's kind of like, it's not just a simple build it and people will come. You need to make it accessible for people.
Yeah. So there was a great example on LinkedIn of a station entrance which had a fence in front of it to stop people from crossing a 6-lane highway, which people were then jumping the fence. Rather than going, why do people want to cross this 6-lane highway? Maybe we need to fix that. They just put in extra fencing.
Yes. Don't even get me started on the road, aspects on these things. Like there's just so many of those sorts of things. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we've come to a close, Graham. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah. Yeah, no. So just reinforce, find out why something is included in the project rather than just going, oh, well, it's something that we can eliminate to save time or budget.
Brilliant.
I think that's
that piece of wisdom from our resident engineer. We will stop there. Thank you very much, Graham. As always, it was great talking to you.
Thank you. Russell. I'm going to leave that in.
The name's on the screen in case you have a senior moment. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very senior. Very senior.
Who am I talking to? Who do I talk to every week? I can't remember his name.
Yeah. I'm gonna leave that in to punish myself. So, all right. Yes. Thank you, Russell, and we will talk to you. We'll talk at you next week.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. And if you liked what you've listened to or watched, please buy us a coffee or a bus ticket or a train ticket on our Patreon account. It would be greatly appreciated. Link below.